Hello everyone, today we will descend into the final hours of a queen whose name still coils like incense through the corridors of time, Cleopatra VII of Egypt. Imagine a palace choked with silence, its marble halls stripped of laughter, the scent of crushed lotus and bitter myrrh lingering like the ghost of an empire. Outside, Roman boots pound the sand. Inside, a queen waits, not for rescue, but for the precise moment to choose her own end. Before we get started on this story, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And when we reach the end, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Was she a tragic lover, a manipulative ruler, or something far more dangerous? The throne room of the palace was colder now, though the Egyptian sun still seared outside. The drapes no longer danced. The servants no longer sang. Cleopatra sat beneath the golden vulture-crowned canopy, her frame more rigid than regal, her eyes hollowed by too many sleepless nights and crumbling dreams. Gone was the opulence that once made Rome tremble with envy. Her ships burned in the harbor of Actium. Her lover, Mark Antony, bled out on a blade forged not by Rome but by despair. And the desert wind, once an ally whispering promises through the reeds, now howled like a Roman trumpet announcing conquest. Octavian had arrived. She'd heard the iron doors close behind him just hours ago, his sandals echoing with smug precision through the marble corridors as he took possession of her city. Alexandria had surrendered without a final scream. The once mighty queen, heir to pharaohs and lover of emperors, was now a prisoner in her own palace. But Cleopatra was not unfamiliar with cages. She had grown up in one, a royal serpent's nest of brothers and sisters eager to poison for a crown. She'd worn silk while dodging daggers. She had watched Ptolemaic blood seep into the Nile like ink from a broken scroll. Surviving was an art form she had mastered early. But today, it no longer mattered. This was not about surviving. This was about not being displayed. She imagined it, her arms shackled, her neck adorned not with lapis and gold, but with Roman rope. Octavian would force her through the streets of Rome like a chained animal, his prize in the great triumph parade. Spectators would cheer the humiliation of Egypt. Children would throw stones. Her name would become a joke, a spectacle. The whore queen, the foreign seductress, the fallen goddess. No. That fate was not hers. The room around her was heavy with heat and history. Papyrus scrolls lay half-burned beside the altar to Isis. Antony's sword, still crusted with the blood of a failed final stand, rested on the floor as if mocking her indecision. She reached for it once, hesitated. That wasn't her way. Cleopatra did not die by the methods of men. In the corner, her most trusted servants, Iris and Charmian, watched with reddened eyes. They had remained when others fled. Even now, they said nothing, because they knew. They had seen the quiet unraveling in their queen's gaze. Not madness. Not fear. But resolve. Cleopatra rose from her throne. Slowly. Each movement deliberate, a ritual in itself. She passed the murals that told her lineage, past gods who no longer answered her prayers. She paused before a large bronze mirror, one that had once reflected the most dangerous woman in the world. Now, it reflected a shadow wrapped in silk and sadness. She adjusted her headdress. "Prepare my final offering," she said. They knew what she meant. Iris turned away quickly, wiping tears from her cheeks. Charmian did not look away. Her gaze was steady, though her hands trembled as she reached for the carved box hidden behind the incense altar. Cleopatra returned to the balcony that overlooked the harbor. Smoke still curled where ships once stood. Her kingdom smoldered in the sunlight. The Nile, ever loyal, rolled on as if unaware of the collapse it bore witness to. Behind her, footsteps approached. The Roman messenger bowed, reluctant, avoiding her gaze. "Octavian grants you an audience, my queen." She did not turn. "He is late." The messenger hesitated. "He comes in peace." Cleopatra laughed softly, only once. So did Caesar. The messenger, unnerved, backed away without another word. When she finally turned, her fingers brushed the small papyrus roll on her writing desk, a letter, half finished, addressed to no one. Perhaps a son who would never rule. Perhaps to history. She let it fall. There would be no more writing. No more speeches. No more bargaining. There was only the question now. When? And how? The queen sat once more, but not on her throne. She chose the floor, the cool marble a welcome relief from the sweltering weight of her decisions. Around her, shadows stretched long as the afternoon waned, creeping across the faded mosaics like quiet assassins. Alexandria, once the jewel of the Mediterranean, was dying with its queen. And in her mind Cleopatra wandered back through the ruins of memory, as if the past might whisper a final strategy. The first ghost to rise was Caesar. She had met him draped in nothing but a carpet, a dramatic entrance that became legend, but beneath the silk and showmanship was cunning. She had needed a protector, and Caesar had needed Egypt. It was a transaction, but also more. For a time, she believed power could be shared between equals, that intellect might seduce more thoroughly than beauty. With Caesar, she had learned to navigate Rome, its treacheries and hungers. He had given her a son. Now that son, Caesar Ion, was being hunted by Octavian. Rumors had reached her. The boy had fled to Upper Egypt with loyal guards, disguised perhaps as a merchant's child or a temple novice. But Octavian would not let him live. A rival heir to Julius Caesar could not be permitted to breathe. Cleopatra clenched her fists. Her child was the last thread of dynasty, and even that thread was fraying. She closed her eyes and let another spectre step forward. Antony. Ah, Antony! Thunder in a man's shape. When Caesar died, Rome bled, and Cleopatra watched the city shatter. She had waited, calmly, strategically, for the next storm to arrive, and it came in the form of Mark Antony. He was nothing like Caesar. Where Caesar was cold marble, Antony was fire. He drank too much, laughed too loud, fought too fast. But he listened. He trusted her. And she, against all her instincts, trusted him. They had ruled in tandem, if not in name then in vision. Their banquets stunned the world. Their fleets dared to challenge Rome. For years she had believed they could bend history like papyrus reeds in the Nile. Then came Actium. Cleopatra had seen the defeat before it arrived. She had warned him, begged him to wait, to withdraw, to let Rome eat itself. But Antony was a soldier, not a serpent. He charged into the trap with pride and fire, and left her to witness the ashes. In the palace gardens now, weeds bloomed where roses once sang. Her lovers were gone, her children hunted, her gods silent. And still, Octavian waited. She did not fear death. She feared the erasure of her narrative. History, she knew, belonged to the victors. If she allowed herself to be taken, she would be remade into something grotesque, a footnote in Roman glory, a cautionary tale about prideful women and foreign witchcraft. Already, Octavian's whispers had spread. Cleopatra used magic, seduced men with poisons, controlled kingdoms with spells and gold. He would not stop with conquest. He would reshape her story. So she planned her ending not as an escape, but as the final stroke of authorship. She remembered an ancient rite once spoken of in hushed tones, the sacred death of a queen by serpent. The asp, a royal cobra, sacred in its own right, was believed to carry the breath of the gods. Not a brutal death, but a divine one. A kiss from the other world. It would not be agony, they said, but a passage. Cleopatra traced the edge of a carved lion's head on her armrest. The lion, once a symbol of her house's strength, now seemed tired. Even the statues mourned. "Charmian!" she whispered. The handmaiden appeared beside her instantly. "Is it prepared?" Charmian nodded. Her face was pale, but steady. The basket is in your chambers, my queen. As you instructed. Beneath the figs. Cleopatra smiled faintly. Good. He must not see it. He must think it an accident. Or a mystery. Yes, my queen. She could feel the pull of her final performance taking shape. It was almost comforting. For all that had been stolen from her, land, love, blood, this moment belonged to her alone. A stage with no audience but the gods. And yet, even as she hardened herself, a pang of regret pierced her resolve. Not for Antony. Not even for Caesar. But for the girl she had once been, the clever, frightened daughter of a decaying dynasty, who had read too many scrolls and dreamed too many dreams. How far she had come. How far she was about to fall. A servant rushed into the room, bowing deeply. Octavian's envoy returns, my queen. He insists the general will visit at dawn to ensure your safety. Safety. The word was almost laughable. Tell him, Cleopatra said coolly, that the Queen of Egypt awaits him. Tell him she is preparing herself to receive his mercy. The servant fled without meeting her eyes. She stood. The air had changed. Outside, the sun was lowering, casting Alexandria in molten light. Inside, the palace exhaled one last time, walls creaking, lamps flickering, curtains shivering with some unseen breath. It was nearly time. And she would not wait for dawn. Darkness had fully descended when Cleopatra entered her private chambers. The torches along the corridor flared low, their flames dancing like whispers behind her. The palace had grown quiet, not the hush of sleep, but the heavy silence of something ending. In the stillness, even the cicadas outside had gone mute. The chamber was unchanged, yet everything felt different. On the polished table by the window sat a humble wicker basket, draped in linen. From a distance, it looked unremarkable, perhaps a servant's offering, perhaps a gift. Only those who knew what waited inside could sense its weight. Charmian stood beside it, as instructed, her expression blank but eyes glistening. Bring IRAs, Cleopatra said softly. Moments later, the second handmaiden arrived, her face wet with tears, her fingers twisted with worry. Either of them asked questions. Neither begged her to reconsider. That had already been done, and it had failed. Their queen was not a woman to turn from a decision once made. Cleopatra unfastened the heavy jewels at her throat. She removed her rings, her bangles, her ceremonial belt. With each discarded piece, she seemed to grow lighter, almost younger. Only the serpent-shaped diadem remained, worn not as decoration, but as defiance. The symbol of royalty. The crown of Isis. The herald of her chosen death. She approached the mirror. Her reflection stared back, withered only by grief, not by time. Her features were still those that had unsettled emperors. But in her gaze now burned something more terrifying than beauty, intent. "Help me dress," she said. They wrapped her in white linen, simple and unadorned, as if she were already entering the afterlife. Her arms were bare, her feet left uncovered. Her body became the ritual. Her breath, the final chant. The scent of lotus oil and crushed myrrh filled the room as the servants anointed her skin, an offering to both gods and history. Outside, the faint sounds of Roman sentries echoed across the city. Alexandria had not yet noticed its queen's vanishing. Cleopatra sat cross-legged on the couch near the basket. She reached out with one hand and gently peeled back the linen. Nestled among fresh figs lay the coiled asp, motionless, but alive. Its eyes, twin slits of polished onyx, blinked once, slowly. It was beautiful, in a terrible way. Its golden brown scales shimmered in the low torchlight, its presence more silent than the grave. She studied it without fear. "Will it be quick?" Iris asked, her voice a ghost. Cleopatra did not answer. She didn't know. She didn't care. The asp was not merely a snake. It was a gatekeeper. A judge. An executioner summoned not by Rome, but by her own hand. She extended her left arm and laid it across her lap, exposing the flesh. The asp remained still. Charmian stepped forward with a small reed stick and prodded the fruit beneath it. The serpent hissed, slow and low, then slithered forward. Cleopatra did not flinch. She didn't even blink. The bite came without ceremony. A flash. A sting. Then silence again. It was not pain that arrived, but cold. A blooming frost beneath her skin, spreading like a pale flower through her veins. Cleopatra exhaled slowly and leaned back. The asp, satisfied, coiled into the figs once more. Iris collapsed at her feet, weeping. Charmian clenched her hands and turned her face away, but she did not move. Cleopatra's breathing slowed. The world around her blurred, edges softened, sounds dampened. The room, once so alive with fragrance and flickering light, now shimmered like a half-remembered dream. She thought of the Nile, of Caesarion's laugh, of Antony's voice at twilight. She thought of power, and how it always slips away in the end. A strange peace settled over her as her limbs grew heavy. Her thoughts came slower, dreamier. The firelight became sunlight. The cold stone floor became a barge upon the river. She was drifting. She was leaving. And for the first time in many years, no one was chasing her. She opened her mouth, as if to speak, but no words came. Her body slackened. Charmian stepped forward, trembling, and lowered her queen gently to the couch, arranging the linen across her still form. Cleopatra looked serene, almost regal. No scream. No blood. No chains. Only silence. The asp remained in the basket, still and eternal. Charmian took the remaining venom into her own palm. Iris did the same. If their queen would meet the gods, they would walk with her. Outside, the wind shifted. Alexandria breathed. Somewhere, Octavian's guards rotated watch, unaware that their prize had slipped through their fingers. There would be no triumph in Rome. No chains. No spectacle. Only questions. Only myth. The morning arrived with a soft glow, the Nile mirroring the early light like a polished shield. Rome's banners snapped gently in the breeze above Alexandria's walls, their crimson faded by salt and sun. Within the palace, the torches had long burned out. The halls, swept and silent, echoed only the breath of history. Octavian entered with ceremony. His armor gleamed, his stride unhurried, his eyes sharp with conquest. The general of Rome had waited long for this moment, the subjugation of Egypt not just in maps and treaties, but in spirit. He had broken Antony. Now, he would break Cleopatra, and parade her defeat through the streets of his empire. But as he stepped into the queen's chamber, the illusion shattered. She lay on the couch, pale and still, dressed in burial linen and surrounded by the unmistakable scent of ritual oils. Her head was tilted slightly, as if listening to some music only the dead could hear. Her handmaids, Charmian and Iris, lay nearby, lifeless, yet lovingly arranged. No blood, no mess. Just stillness. And the basket of figs, knocked slightly open. Octavian froze. His officers entered behind him, then halted just as abruptly. No one spoke. The air had turned funereal, almost holy. It was not the chaos of a suicide, it was the order of a rite. A tableau. A message. She robbed us, one soldier whispered. Octavian approached, his sandals grating against the floor. He looked down at the queen. The asp was nowhere to be seen. Perhaps it had slithered into the shadows. Perhaps it had been taken to the Nile, offered back to the gods. Or perhaps, like her secrets, it would never be found. She was to be brought to Rome. He muttered. Alive. Charmian stirred. The room startled. Somehow, she had not yet passed. Her chest moved faintly. Her lips, blue at the edges, trembled with effort. A soldier rushed forward, but Octavian held up a hand. She opened her eyes, just barely. Looked at the queen. Then at the Roman conqueror. With a voice dry as papyrus, she spoke the final words ever uttered by a servant of Cleopatra. It was fitting of one descended from so many kings. Then she died. Octavian said nothing for a long while. He looked around the chamber, taking in the final performance. The linen robes. The unbroken expression. The quiet dignity. She had stolen the ending from him. What was meant to be a triumph had turned into a tomb. There would be no parading Cleopatra through the streets of Rome in chains. No snarling crowd. No humiliation to inspire fear in future queens. Instead, he was left with a mystery. A legend. And legends were far harder to bury. He ordered the bodies be treated with respect. The room was sealed. But word spread quickly through Alexandria. The queen had died by her own hand. Not with a blade, not with poison in wine, but with the serpent of the gods. Some claimed she had whispered spells in ancient tongues. Others believed Isis herself came down to carry her soul away. The people wept, not all of them, but many, especially those who had once believed Egypt might stand free. Rumors bloomed like desert flowers after rain. They said Cleopatra had laughed at Octavian before dying. They said her son, Caesarion, was avenged by the gods. They said she lived still, sleeping beneath the temple ruins, awaiting rebirth. In truth, her body was taken quietly, embalmed and entombed in haste. Some say she and Antony were buried together, side by side. Others believe the Romans cast them into the sea to erase the final defiance. No tomb has ever been found. Back in Rome, Octavian declared the conquest complete. He took the name Augustus and ruled an empire. Statues were built. Coins were minted. Temples rose. But Cleopatra's death haunted him. It was said that in his final years, he refused to speak her name aloud. She became both curse and crown to those who followed, proof that even the greatest empire could be outwitted by a woman in her final hour. Historians would argue for centuries whether her end was noble or manipulative, brave or desperate. But the image remained fixed, a queen in white, a silent snake, and a death that echoed louder than war drums. For Cleopatra had done what no army could, she denied Rome its narrative. And in doing so, she secured her immortality. The years that followed buried Cleopatra's body, but not her shadow. Whispers of her final day drifted like incense through Rome and beyond, across oceans, through libraries, whispered in candlelit corners where poets and philosophers debated what truly made a woman dangerous. Was it her beauty? Her mind? Her refusal to kneel? She had become more than queen. She had become myth. Rome tried to reshape her. Octavian, now Augustus, commissioned marble reliefs that painted her as a temptress, a sorceress who had corrupted noble Roman men. Plays were staged where she moaned in despair, took her life for love, and served only as a cautionary tale. But behind the masks and propaganda, a deeper truth gnawed at the empire. Cleopatra had chosen her death, and in that choice, stolen the ending. From Alexandria to Athens, scribes copied her story, blending fact and fiction. Some said she raised armies from shadows. Others claimed she had cursed the lineage of Rome, that every Caesar to come would be haunted by a queen who denied submission. The poets were especially cruel, and strangely reverent. Ovid, Plutarch, Lucan, they could not look away from her flame, even as they claimed she was mad or monstrous. But the people remembered differently. Among the women of Egypt, Cleopatra became a symbol. In quiet homes, mothers whispered her name with reverence. In marketplaces, her story was passed like a secret recipe, one that spoke of dignity, cunning, and wrath. She was no longer merely the last pharaoh. She was defiance incarnate. In the years after her death, Egypt changed forever. It became a Roman province. The temples were taxed, the old gods faded into mosaic ruins, Latin replaced the courtly Greek. And yet, among the papyrus reeds and crumbling sphinxes, her face remained, carved into forgotten altars, etched into coins that farmers still found in the soil. And what of Caesar Ion? The boy king, blood of Caesar and Cleopatra, had been captured. Octavian, ever the careful strategist, had ordered his execution quietly. 2 Caesars is one too many, he is said to have muttered. No monument was built. No urn placed in the mausoleum. The child vanished into silence, a thread erased. But the loss only deepened her legend. Because Cleopatra had not died screaming. She had not begged. She had not been dragged in chains. She had died on her own terms, silent, composed, and poisonous. And so the myth evolved. The snake, once a symbol of terror, became sacred again. Worn on amulets. Carved into tombs. Painted on walls where queens had once danced. The asp was no longer death, it was transcendence. A gate, a guard, a companion in endings that were not truly endings. Every empire must learn to fear a story it cannot control. As centuries passed, Cleopatra transformed again. During the Renaissance, painters adorned her with velvet and pearls, casting her as both Venus and victim. In Enlightenment salons, she was studied as a strategist. In modern stages and screens, she flickered between lover and ruler, villain and martyr. Elizabeth Taylor's eyes. Shakespeare's verses. Hollywood's golden silks. Each retelling added another scale to her mythic serpent. And still, no one has found her tomb. Archaeologists search. Egyptologists dig along the Nile's buried shoulders, chasing fragments. Was she buried beside Antony in a lover's crypt? Was she sealed in a temple vault beneath the city? Or had Rome scattered her bones like seeds, hoping her name would never bloom again? But bloom it did. Because Cleopatra's true monument was not stone or scroll, it was the fear she instilled in those who would chain her. Her death, crafted with more precision than any Roman blade, became the ultimate form of authorship. She wrote herself into history not as a victim, but as a sovereign of the end. Imagine her now, if you can. Not weeping. Not broken. But seated upon her couch, linen robes glowing with sacred oil, the asp coiled at her side like an obedient god. Her eyes fixed on eternity, her body becoming myth even before it cooled. Cleopatra VII, the Philippator, goddess who loves her father, died not because she was conquered, but because she refused to be rewritten. Her silence was louder than 1,000 Roman trumpets. And we are still listening.